Welcome to Whispers of Dharma, where stories of karma, compassion, and rebirth are softly told to heal the soul. She died once, but her love kept breathing. At midnight in room 237, the ventilator stopped working for exactly 3 minutes. No power outage. No mechanical failure. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes your soul remember what you've tried so hard to forget. The grandfather clock in the hospital corridor ticked with an impossible rhythm, sometimes racing, sometimes crawling, as if time itself was wounded. Emergency lights flickered without reason, casting dancing shadows that looked too much like reaching hands. In the air, the scent of jasmine incense drifted through sterile halls where no incense should burn. And on the windowsill, a single white rose turned black. Without wind, without touch, petal by petal. Dr. Sarah Mendez stood frozen beside the bed, watching her patient breathe again. After 3 minutes of impossible stillness. But something had changed in those moments. Something that made her hands shake and her heart remember a name she had sworn to forget. Maya Chen, the patient she had failed to save 23 years ago. The woman whose forgiveness she had never deserved. The woman who had died because Sarah chose ambition over compassion. Buddhist wisdom whispers that karma never forgets, even when we try our hardest to forget it. That healing requires facing the wounds we've inflicted on others. That rebirth sometimes brings back those we've wronged, to offer us one final chance at redemption. When the dead refuse to stay buried, is it punishment or is it mercy? Street Catherine's hospital stood against the Seattle skyline, like a monument to both healing and sorrow. Rain had been falling for 7 days straight, turning the city into a watercolor painting, where edges blurred and memories bled through the present. Dr. Sarah Mendez walked these corridors with the weight of 23 years pressing against her shoulders. Chief of Emergency Medicine now, respected, accomplished, carrying accolades like armor against the guilt that never slept. The sound of her heels on linoleum echoed through halls that had seen thousands of arrivals and departures. The soft beeping of monitors created a rhythm like heartbeats that never quite matched her own. And somewhere in the walls, in the spaces between breaths, she could swear she heard whispers in a voice that shouldn't exist anymore. Room 237 had been empty for 3 weeks, until tonight. The patient had arrived unconscious. No identification, no family, just a woman in her 40s with long black hair and fingers that moved as if playing an invisible piano. But it was her face that made Sarah's world tilt. The same delicate features, the same gentle curve of lips that had once smiled at her with complete trust. Maya Chen, or someone who looked exactly like her, lying in the same type of bed where Maya had died, because Sarah had made a choice. The choice that ended a life and began a lifetime of carrying the weight of unhealed karma. Rain drummed against the windows in patterns that sounded like Morse code, spelling out words she didn't want to read. The hospital's heating system hummed and sighed, like breathing, and every shadow seemed to hold the shape of someone watching. Sarah had built her career on the foundation of that one failure. Every life she saved was an attempt to balance the scale of cosmic justice. Every promotion, every accolade, every moment of professional triumph was shadowed by the knowledge that Maya Chen would never see another sunrise. The nurses whispered about the patient in 237, how her vitals sometimes showed patterns that shouldn't be possible, how flowers left in her room bloomed out of season, then withered overnight, how visitors claimed to hear soft piano music drifting from beneath her door, though no piano existed in the room. But Sarah knew the truth that settled like ice in her chest. Maya had been a pianist before the accident that brought her to Sarah's emergency room that night, before Sarah chose to prioritize a senator's son over Maya's life, before karma began its slow, inevitable circle. Buddhist wisdom teaches that compassion must begin with facing our failures. That healing cannot happen while we hide from the pain we've caused. And sometimes, rebirth offers opportunities for forgiveness we thought we'd lost forever. The patient in room 237 had been unconscious for 6 days. But tonight, as Sarah stood in the doorway, watching the monitors paint, green lines of life across dark screens. She saw the woman's eyes flutter open. And when those eyes found Sarah's path, they held recognition that made time stop. 23 years ago, Sarah Mendes was a third-year resident, hungry for recognition and desperate to prove herself in a world that didn't believe. A young Latina doctor belonged in emergency medicine. The night Maya Chen arrived, Sarah was already exhausted from a 14-hour shift. The emergency room buzzed with the controlled chaos of urban medicine. Overdoses, car accidents, domestic violence calls that painted the night in shades of human frailty. Maya had been brought in after a head-on collision on the interstate. Internal bleeding, possible brain trauma, her beautiful hands. Those pianist's hands, crushed and swollen. But her eyes, even through the pain, held a gentleness that made Sarah pause. "Doctor," Maya had whispered, her voice barely audible above the machine sound. "Will I be able to play again?" Her fingers moved weakly, as if touching invisible keys. Music is all I have. Sarah had taken those broken hands gently, feeling the calluses that years of dedication had built on Maya's fingertips. "We'll do everything we can," she had promised, meaning it with every cell in her tired body. But 20 minutes later, everything changed. The senator's son arrived in a private ambulance, surrounded by bodyguards and political pressure that filled the emergency room like toxic smoke. Same type of accident, similar injuries, but his family name carried weight that Maya's didn't. The attending physician pulled Sarah aside. "Mendes, you take the VIP. Chen can wait. Her insurance is complicated." The senator's office has already called twice. Sarah stood at the crossroads of karma and ambition. Maya needed surgery immediately. Every minute delayed decreased her chances. But the senator's son represented opportunity, career advancement, the recognition she had worked so hard to earn. She chose wrong. For 3 hours, Sarah worked on the senator's son, while Maya waited. For 3 hours, Maya's internal bleeding worsened her brain swelled, her chances diminished. For 3 hours, compassion lost to calculation. When Sarah finally returned to Maya's bedside, it was too late. Maya's eyes had lost their gentle light. Her pianist's hands lay still, and her final words were a whispered question. "Why didn't you come back?" The senator's son recovered completely. Sarah received a commendation for her excellent care. Her career trajectory soared, but every success was built on the foundation of Maya's sacrifice, and forgiveness became a word that tasted like ashes in Sarah's mouth. Buddhist wisdom teaches that we cannot outrun the consequences of our choices. That karma follows us through every breath, every heartbeat, every moment we try to forget. That healing requires more than success or achievement. It requires facing the truth of what we've done. Maya Chen died at 4:17 a.m. and Sarah had been counting. Every 4:17 since then, 8,439 times, she had watched those numbers appear on clocks and phones, feeling Maya's absence like a hole in the world. Now, 23 years later, those same gentle eyes looked up at her from the bed in room 237, and in them, Sarah saw something that terrified her more than anger or accusation. She saw recognition. She saw forgiveness. She saw the impossible possibility that rebirth had brought Maya back, not for revenge, but for healing. The patient's eyes opened fully. "Hello, Dr. Mendez," she said, and her voice carried the exact intonation, the same gentle cadence that had haunted Sarah's dreams for 23 years. Sarah's clipboard clattered to the floor. The sound echoed through the sudden silence that seemed to swallow all other hospital noise. No monitors beeping, no overhead pages, no footsteps in the hallway, just the impossible reality of Maya Chen's voice, speaking her name. "You're not." Sarah's voice cracked. "Maya Chen is dead. I was there. I watched her die. I was the one who chose another patient over my life," the woman finished gently. the one who prioritized political pressure over medical ethics, the one who has carried the weight of that choice every day since. The room temperature plummeted. Sarah's breath became visible in small puffs of mist. The monitors around the bed began displaying impossible readings. Heart rate 72, blood pressure normal, oxygen saturation perfect, but according to the system, the patient had been dead for exactly 23 years. "This isn't real," Sarah whispered, backing toward the door. "This is a breakdown. Stress-induced psychosis. I need psychiatric evaluation. You need to listen," Maya said, sitting up in the bed with fluid grace that defied her medical chart. "Sarah, I didn't come back to torment you. I came back because your karma and mine are still tangled together. We both need healing." The lights in the room began to pulse in rhythm with Sarah's heartbeat. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like the inside of lungs, and from somewhere impossible, the sound of piano music drifted through the air. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Maya's favorite piece. "You remember my music?" Maya smiled, and the expression was exactly as Sarah remembered. Warm, understanding, free of malice. "I used to play for the children's ward every Sunday afternoon. Do you remember how their faces lit up?" Sarah's legs gave out. She slumped against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the cold linoleum floor. "I remember everything," she sobbed. "I remember your hands, moving like they were dancing. I remember how you hummed while you waited. I remember the trust in your eyes. When you asked me if you'd play again, and what did you tell me?" Maya asked softly. "I promised we'd do everything we could." The words tasted like poison, but I lied. I chose ambition over compassion. I chose career over karma. I chose wrong. Maya rose from the bed, her feet touching the floor. Without making sound, she moved toward Sarah with the ethereal grace of someone who existed between worlds, between life and death, between forgiveness and justice. You chose fear. Maya corrected. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. But fear is not evil, Sarah. It's just incomplete. It's love that hasn't learned to trust itself yet. The piano music grew louder, filling the room with harmonies that seemed to vibrate in Sarah's bones. The walls around them began to dissolve, revealing not the hospital corridor, but a concert hall where Maya sat at a grand piano, her crushed hands whole and beautiful again. This is what I lost, Maya said, her fingers dancing across keys that sang with celestial clarity. Not just my life, but my purpose, my gift, my way of bringing healing to the world. Sarah watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the music painted pictures in the air around them. Children's faces lighting up with joy, elderly patients remembering lost love, healing happening, note by note, melody by melody, all the healing. That never happened because Sarah chose wrong. Buddhist wisdom teaches that every action creates ripples across the ocean of existence, that when we wound others, we wound ourselves. That karma is not punishment, but opportunity, the universe's infinite compassion, offering chances for redemption. What do you want from me? Sarah whispered. What can I possibly do to make this right? Maya's hands stilled on the keys. The concert hall faded, and they were back in room 237, surrounded by monitors and the scent of jasmine that shouldn't exist. You can choose again, Maya said simply. Tonight, right now, you can choose compassion over fear. You can choose healing over karma. But the choice will cost you everything you've built on my grave. The choice Maya offered wasn't theoretical. It wasn't metaphorical. It was immediate, concrete, and terrifying in its simplicity. Down the hall, in room 241, lay another patient. Maria Santos, an undocumented immigrant with no insurance, no family to advocate for her, no political connections to ensure proper care. internal bleeding, possible brain trauma, the same injuries that had killed Maya. And in the VIP suite upstairs, the governor's daughter waited for surgery she didn't urgently need, but demanded anyway. Cosmetic reconstruction after a minor car accident, scheduled for the same operating room that could save Maria's life. The hospital board had made their preference clear. The governor was considering major funding increases. Maria Santos was an expense they couldn't afford. The choice seemed obvious to everyone except Sarah, who now saw karma offering her a chance to rewrite history. "You understand?" Maya said, standing beside Sarah in the hallway where no one else could see her. "This is not coincidence. This is the universe asking you to choose compassion over convenience, to choose healing over career advancement, to choose the person who needs you most over the one who can help you most." Sarah walked toward room 241, each step feeling like walking through molasses. The air grew thicker. With each decision she postponed, hospital staff moved around her. In slow motion, their voices becoming distant echoes, as if she existed in a pocket universe where only truth mattered. Maria Santos lay unconscious, her brown skin pale from blood loss, her calloused hands telling stories of hard work and determination. In her purse, Sarah found photographs of 3 children, all under 10 or depending on their mother's survival. "She has the same injuries I had," Maya whispered, appearing beside the bed. "The same time window, the same choices you faced 23 years ago. But this time, you know what the right choice looks like." Sarah's hands trembled as she reviewed Maria's chart. Every detail screamed urgency. Every indicator demanded immediate surgery. Every minute of delay decreased her chances of survival. Her phone buzzed. A text from the Chief of Staff. "Governor's daughter goes first. Board's direct order. Santos can wait." The same words, the same pressure, the same impossible choice between doing what was right and doing what was expedient. If I choose Maria, Sarah said aloud, knowing Maya could hear her. They'll destroy my career, everything I've built, every life I've saved. Since you died, it will all be gone. And if you don't? Maya asked. Sarah closed her eyes, seeing the future spread out like a map of consequences. Maria would die, as Maya had died. 3 children would grow up without their mother. Another family would be shattered by the calculus of institutional priorities. And Sarah would continue carrying the weight of choosing wrong twice now, proving that some people never learn from their karma. Buddhist wisdom teaches that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. That compassion requires sacrifice. That healing begins when we choose love over safety, truth over comfort, service over self-preservation. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at Maya. If I save Maria, will you forgive me for letting you die? Maya smiled, and for the first time in 23 years, Sarah felt the possibility of peace. Sarah, I forgave you. The moment I died, forgiveness was never the issue. The question is, can you forgive yourself enough to choose compassion over fear? Down the hall, the elevator doors opened. The surgical team emerged, ready to take the governor's daughter to the operating room. In 30 seconds, they would pass room 241. In 30 seconds, Sarah would have to choose between Maria's life and her career, between karma and compassion, between fear and love, between the person she had been and the person she could still become. 29, 28, 27. Sarah stepped into the hallway, her hand reaching for the surgical team, her voice preparing to speak words that would either damn her or finally set her free. "Stop!" Sarah called out, her voice cutting through the hospital's controlled chaos. Change of plans. Room 241 goes first. The surgical team paused, confusion rippling across their faces. Dr. Harrison, the lead surgeon, checked his tablet. Mendez, The board was very clear. Governor's daughter takes priority. Santos is uninsured. Santos is dying, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening in her chest. Immediate internal bleeding, brain swelling, maybe 20 minutes before irreversible damage. The governor's daughter can wait 2 hours without complications. That's not the point, Dr. Harrison insisted. Orders are orders. You know what happens to doctors who ignore the board's directives. Behind him, Maya appeared, visible only to Sarah, her eyes filled with an emotion deeper than hope. Recognition. The knowledge that Sarah was finally choosing the person she was meant to be. Yes, Sarah said quietly. I know exactly what happens. I lose my job. I lose my reputation. I lose everything I've built over 23 years. But if I don't save Maria Santos, I lose my soul. The air around them began to shimmer with an energy that made the fluorescent lights flicker and dawn. The temperature dropped and everyone's breath became visible, but only Sarah could see Maya stepping forward, her form becoming more solid, more real. Forgiveness, Maya whispered, begins when we stop choosing fear over love. When we stop protecting ourselves at the expense of others. When we finally understand that compassion is not weakness, it's the strongest force in the universe. Dr. Harrison stepped closer, his voice lowering to a threatening whisper. Mendez, you're making a career-ending mistake. The board will have your medical license. You'll never practice medicine again. Then I'll find another way to heal people. Sarah replied, feeling something ancient and wounded begin to mend in her chest. But I won't let another person die because I chose convenience over conscience. The surgical team exchanged glances, uncertainty rippling through their professional facade. They had all witnessed similar choices throughout their careers. They had all felt the weight of institutional pressure versus medical ethics. They had all wondered what they would do when forced to choose. Dr. Kim, the anesthesiologist, spoke first. "Maria Santos has children," she said quietly. "I saw their pictures. 3 little ones who need their mother. And the governor's daughter is here for cosmetic work," added Dr. Patel, the surgical resident. "Medically speaking, there's no contest. Santos should go first." One by one, the team members made their choice, not based on politics or career advancement, but on the simple truth that medicine exists to preserve life, not to serve power. Dr. Harrison stood alone in his objection, outnumbered by colleagues who had rediscovered their moral compass. "This is mutiny," he said finally. "The board will hear about this. All of your careers are over. Then we'll face the consequences together," Sarah said, feeling Maya's presence like warm sunlight on her shoulders. "Because some things are more important than careers. Some choices define who we are versus who we're afraid to be." As the team wheeled Maria Santos toward the operating room, Maya walked beside the gurney, her hand resting on the unconscious woman's forehead. "She'll live," Maya said softly. "Her children will have their mother. And you, Sarah, you have finally chosen compassion over karma." Buddhist wisdom teaches that true healing happens when we align our actions with our deepest values. That forgiveness flows, not from perfection, but from choosing love over fear, service over self-interest, healing over harm. But as Sarah watched her career disappear into the operating room, she felt something else approaching, something that made the air shimmer and the lights flicker with supernatural intensity. The true test was just beginning. The operating room doors had barely closed when Sarah's phone exploded with notification, text after text, from hospital administration, each one more threatening than the last. "Report to boardroom immediately. Insubordination charges file. Medical license under review. Security escort required." But something else was happening too. Something that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. The temperature around her plummeted so suddenly that frost began forming on the hospital windows. The lights didn't just flicker, they strobed like lightning. Maya appeared in front of her, but something was wrong. Her gentle features were twisted with pain, her form flickering between solid and translucent. Behind her, other figures materialized, shadowy, angry, demanding. You think one good choice erases 23 years of moral cowardice? The voice came from everywhere at once, echoing off walls that suddenly seemed to pulse with malevolent life. You think saving one Maria Santos balances the scale. For Maya Chen, Sarah spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice. The hospital corridor stretched impossibly long, in both directions, lined with doors that opened onto scenes from her past. Through one door, she saw herself as a young resident choosing the senator's son over Maya's life. Through another, she watched herself accepting accolades built on that choice. Door after door revealed moments when ambition had trumped compassion. You see, the voice continued, growing stronger, more accusatory. One moment of courage doesn't erase a lifetime of choosing personal gain over patient care. The karma you've accumulated demands payment. Maria Santos was just the beginning. Maya struggled against the dark energy surrounding her. Sarah, don't listen. This isn't karma speaking. It's fear. Your fear that you don't deserve forgiveness. Your fear that one good choice isn't enough. But the shadows pressed closer, and Sarah could see faces in their darkness. Every patient she had deprioritized for political reasons. Every family she had kept waiting while treating connected patients first. Every moment when she had chosen career advancement over pure medicine. They all demand justice. The voice whispered, they all deserve what Maya Chen got, your destruction. your career, your reputation, your peace of mind. All of it must be sacrificed to balance the scales. Sarah felt herself being pulled toward the shadows, toward a darkness that promised to swallow her whole. Her 23 years of guilt and self-recrimination had created its own gravitational pull, its own form of spiritual quicksand. But then Maya broke free from the dark energy, her form blazing with sudden light. No, she said firmly. Sarah chose compassion. She chose healing. She chose to put Maria's life above her own career. That choice transforms everything. The shadows recoiled, but didn't retreat. One choice against thousands. One moment of courage against decades of cowardice. The math doesn't balance. Maya Chen, she still owes for your death. Then I forgive the dead. Maya said simply, I forgive all of it. The choices, the consequences, the 23 years of carrying guilt that was never hers to carry. Sarah Mendes is free to choose compassion now. The hospital corridor shuddered and cracked, reality reasserting itself against the supernatural storm. The shadows screamed as they dissolved, taking with them 23 years of accumulated guilt and self-recrimination. Buddhist wisdom teaches that forgiveness is not earned through perfect behavior, but given freely by those who understand that healing requires letting go of the past. That rebirth happens not just between lifetimes, but in moments when we choose love over fear. But something else was happening too. Something that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. The temperature around her plummeted so suddenly that frost began forming on the hospital windows. The lights didn't just flicker, they strobed like lightning. Maya appeared in front of her, but something was wrong. Her gentle features were twisted with pain, her form flickering between solid and translucent. Behind her, other figures materialized, shadowy, angry, demanding. You think one good choice erases 23 years of moral cowardice? The voice came from everywhere at once, echoing off walls that suddenly seemed to pulse with malevolent life. You think saving one, Maria Santos, balances the scale for Maya Chen? Sarah spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice. The hospital corridor stretched impossibly long in both directions, lined with doors that opened onto scenes from her past. Through one door, she saw herself as a young resident choosing the senator's son over Maya's life. Through another, she watched herself accepting accolades built on that choice. Door after door revealed moments when ambition had trumped compassion. You see, the voice continued, growing stronger, more accusatory. One moment of courage doesn't erase a lifetime of choosing personal gain over patient care. The karma you've accumulated demands payment. Maria Santos was just the beginning. Maya struggled against the dark energy surrounding her. Sarah, don't listen. This isn't karma speaking, it's fear. Your fear that you don't deserve forgiveness. Your fear that one good choice isn't enough. But the shadows pressed closer, and Sarah could see faces in their darkness. Every patient she had deprioritized for political reasons. Every family she had kept waiting while treating connected patients first. Every moment when she had chosen career advancement over pure medicine. They all demand justice. The voice whispered, they all deserve what Maya Chen got to: your destruction, your career, your reputation, your peace of mind. All of it must be sacrificed to balance the scales. Sarah felt herself being pulled toward the shadows, toward a darkness that promised to swallow her whole. Her 23 years of guilt and self-recrimination had created its own gravitational pull, its own form of spiritual quicksand. But then Maya broke free from the dark energy, her form blazing with sudden light. "No," she said firmly. Sarah chose compassion. She chose healing. She chose to put Maria's life above her own career. That choice transforms everything. The shadows recoiled, but didn't retreat. One choice against thousands. One moment of courage against the decades of cowardice. The math doesn't balance. Maya Chen, she still owes for your death. Then I forgive the debt. Maya said simply, I forgive all of it. The choices, the consequences, the 23 years of carrying guilt that was never hers to carry. Sarah Mendes is free to choose compassion now. The hospital corridor shuddered and cracked, reality reasserting itself against the supernatural storm. The shadows screamed as they dissolved, taking with them 23 years of accumulated guilt and self-recrimination. Buddhist wisdom teaches that forgiveness is not earned through perfect behavior, but given freely by those who understand that healing requires letting go of the past. That rebirth happens not just between lifetimes, but in moments when we choose love over fear. It's finished, Maya said softly. The karma that bound us together has been transformed into something beautiful. You chose healing over harm. You chose compassion over career. You chose to become the doctor you were meant to be. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now you live, Maya replied, her voice fading, like music on the wind. You find new ways to heal. You teach others that compassion is stronger than fear. You show the world that rebirth doesn't require death, just the courage to choose differently. As Maya's spirit dissolved into morning light, Sarah heard piano music drifting from somewhere impossible. Chopin's Nocturne played with the joy of someone finally free to share their gift with the universe. The healing was complete. The karma was transformed, and Sarah Mendes walked into a future where forgiveness had replaced guilt, where compassion had conquered fear, where every choice would be guided by love. 6 months later, Sarah stood in a free clinic in the poorest part of Seattle, treating patients who had nowhere else to go. The state medical board had suspended her license for 1 year. No hospital would hire her. Her savings were nearly gone, but she had never been happier. The clinic was run by Dr. Kim, Dr. Patel, and the other doctors who had been fired for choosing compassion over compliance. Together, they had created something beautiful, a place where healing was the only priority. But here's what will make your soul shiver. That morning, as Sarah cleaned a child's scraped knee, she heard familiar music drifting through the waiting room. Piano music, Chopin's Nocturne. She followed the sound to find a young woman at an old upright piano, her fingers dancing across keys worn smooth by years of use. The woman looked up and smiled, and Sarah's breath caught. "Hello, Dr. Mendez," the young woman said. "I'm Lisa Chen. I volunteer here on weekends. My mother would have loved what you've built here." Sarah's heart stopped. "Your mother?" "Maya Chen," Lisa said softly. "She died before I was born, but my father told me stories. How she played piano for sick children, how she believed music could heal what medicine couldn't touch." The room seemed to shimmer with invisible energy. Sarah realized that Maya had been pregnant when she died, that the life Sarah failed to save had contained another life, a daughter, who carried her mother's gift. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered. "If your mother died before you were born, emergency C-section," Lisa explained. "They saved me even though they couldn't save her." My father said, "The doctor who delivered me cried the whole time." Sarah remembered now the final desperate attempt to save something from the tragedy. The baby girl who breathed when her mother couldn't, the one small life that survived Sarah's terrible choice. She would have been so proud of you, Lisa continued, her hands returning to the piano keys. My father told me about the hospital, how you lost everything to save someone else, how you chose healing over politics. As Lisa played, the clinic filled with the same healing energy Maya had brought to hospital wards. Children stopped crying. Adults relaxed. The very air seemed to pulse with compassion. Buddhist wisdom teaches that love transcends death, that healing passes. From generation to generation, that karma creates infinite opportunities for redemption. Maya's music lived on in her daughter's hands. Her compassion lived on in Sarah's choices. There's something else, Lisa said, reaching into her bag. I found this in my mother's things. I think it was meant for you. She handed Sarah a letter, yellowed with age, addressed in Maya's careful handwriting, for the doctor who couldn't save me. Inside, in words written before Maya ever entered the emergency room, was a message that transcended time. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But please know that healing is not about perfect choices. It's about learning from imperfect ones. Use my death to save others. Transform karma into compassion. Choose love over fear. This is how we heal the wounds of the world. Sarah looked up to find Lisa smiling, her mother's gentleness shining in her eyes. She forgave you before you ever needed forgiveness, Lisa said. Now you can finally forgive yourself. As piano music filled the clinic with healing energy, Sarah understood the ultimate truth about karma. It's not punishment for past mistakes, but preparation for future compassion. Because when we heal from the wound of karma, we don't just free ourselves, we create space for rebirth, for forgiveness, for the infinite healing that flows when love conquers fear. If you believe that karma always guides us, please subscribe and leave a reflection so we can awaken together. This is Whispers of Dharma, Every story is a seed of wisdom. See you again in the next whisper.